Hey, what's up, guys? One of my subscribers asked me the other day I would do something on the cult-like church leader there in Moscow, Idaho, Doug Wilson. So that's what I'm going to do this evening. I'm going to read this article about him and play a couple of very cringe-worthy videos that he has done over the past couple of months. So here we go, guys. Cult-like church takeover of Idaho college town is fueled by a misogynist, rape-friendly theology. Pastor Doug Wilson of Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. In most regards, Moscow, Idaho is the embodiment of the bucolic college town, tree-covered neighborhoods, quiet streets, quaint shops downtown, and a pretty University of Idaho college campus. But for people who live there, the insidious presence of Pastor Doug Wilson's cult-like Christ Church, not at all obvious on the surface, but cumulatively overwhelming at times, can make life on the Palouse surreal, even nightmarish. More as a deep profile by Sarah Stankorb at Vice reveals, Wilson's domineering evangelical church, which buys up property and businesses throughout the Latah County community and bullies both members and non-members who question either its edicts or his far-right theology, is built on a fundamentally misogynist worldview that permits male members to rape their wives and threatens any women who object. Stan Korb's report details the story of the women who have survived Christ Church's culture that normalizes sexual abuse and harassing survivors, one describing being raped repeatedly by her husband, then becoming an outcast when she divorced him. Others describe being sexually abused as teenagers by men who taught in the church's schools. That's the Logos schools. I covered this earlier with Steve Sittler. This ethos within the church is a direct outgrowth of the theology that Wilson teaches. He asserts that husbands have complete spiritual responsibility for the household, which includes preventing the wife from failing to submit to his will in spending habits, television viewing habits, weight, rejection of his leadership, laziness in cleaning the house, lack of responsiveness to sexual advances. Wilson contends that modern society has stripped men of their intended roles, including their sexual mores. He has written that the sexual act cannot be made into a egalitarian pleasure party. Instead, a man penetrates, conquers, colonizes planets, while a woman receives, surrenders, accepts. He argues, he concludes that the true authority and true submission are therefore an erotic necessity. Despite its location in a remote rural college town, Christ Church is not merely a fringe cult. Wilson is a major figure in the evangelical homeschooling and classical Christian school movements, having helped found the Association of Classical and Christian Schools, which accredits institutions similar to Wilson's. He also operates a publishing house, Logos Books, that provides curriculum materials for both homeschoolers and classical schools. Its current expansion plans in Moscow include a new complex for Logos School. I've heard some bad things about that school. I've heard a lot of kids got molested there. Built on 30 acres of land on the town's northwestern perimeter, A fundraising video reminds viewers that much of what we are doing in education is exported to hundreds of classical Christian schools across the country and beyond. Much of what Wilson teaches has long been controversial. In 2004, the Southern Poverty Law Center's Mark Potok exposed both his church's cult-like creeping takeover of Moscow, as well as the far-right dominionist beliefs embedded in the school's literature, including the defense of the Confederacy and slavery. Wilson co-wrote a book, Southern Slavery, as it was featured in the Logos Books curriculum, which claimed in part slavery as it existed in the South was a relationship based upon mutual affection and confidence. That's not true at all. It argued there has never been a multiracial society which has existed with such mutual intimacy and harmony in the history of the world. Slave life was to them a life of plenty, of simple pleasures, of food, clothes, and good medical care. At a 2003 public forum in Moscow, Wilson attempted to defend the book, claiming it had been misinterpreted. My defense of the South does not make me racist. He said, I'm not interested in defending slavery. I don't believe we should practice slavery. What I said is that a Christian man in the South could be a slave owner. He needed to follow the rules of the New Testament. Christian slave owners were compelled to teach their slaves to read and teach them Christian values. When there is a chance for freedom, the Bible tells the slaves to take it. Paul lays out the peaceful end to slavery. That is not how Southern slavery ended in the United States. This dude's off his fucking rocker, guys. Wilson has taken other racially incendiary positions. In 2013, he denounced pastors who voted for Barack Obama as unfit for the pulpit. Any evangelical leader, by which I mean someone like a minister or an elder who voted for Obama the second time, is not qualified for the office he holds and should resign that office, Wilson wrote, unless and until he repents of how he is thinking about the challenges confronting our nation. He should not be entrusted with the care of souls. Moreover, Wilson wrote, black pastors were especially corrupt in backing Obama. Not only must the dignity of human life be upheld by white and black Christian leaders alike, to the extent we may allow any differences, it should be expected a greater vehemence in opposing abortion in the person of its advocates and enablers for black leaders. He opined this is because it is their people who are being disproportionately targeted by the white Sanguinites, and a black Christian leader who cannot identify a Sanguinite is a rabbit leader who does not know what a hawk looks like. In recent years, he has heightened his traditional attacks on modern Moors, including a 2020 speech he gave at the UI campus titled The Lost Virtue of Sexism, in which he argued that everyone can agree the Bible is sexist, but that the Bible is always right. In the speech, he denounced the 2020 Super Bowl halftime show featuring Jennifer Lopez and Shakira as a shank fest, adding, "You might think that women are being elevated by an activity that I would regard as degrading." Wilson's church has also played a leading role in Moscow area protests against COVID-19, healthcare measures, including mask mandates. 3 church members arrested in one of those protests, including Christ Church deacon Gabriel Wrench filed a federal lawsuit in March against Moscow city officials over their arrest at a September 2020 event. As the home of a liberal arts college, Moscow has been viewed statewide as a hotbed for leftist politics, and its voting record has remained predominantly Democrat in most elections, including in 2020 when Latah County was one of Idaho's fewest counties to vote for Joe Biden. This, in fact, is the situation that Wilson has long intended to change. He calls his plans for Moscow a spiritual takeover, more like a cult takeover. Basically, this is a blue dot in a very very red state, and the blue dotters are pleased. Wilson told Religion News Services in an interview, "Our mission is all of Christ for all of life." And if you drill that down, then for all of Moscow. Local residents have been organizing a kind of underground resistance to Wilson's takeover, reflected in the website The Truth About Moscow, which tracks all of Christ Church's operations in the town. Other residents have begun speaking out in local forums. Christ Church's goals promote division, exclude our many friends of whatever faith, include Jewish, Muslim, atheists, or anyone besides Christians as defined as Christ Church. Moscow should not be defined by any religion, or certainly not owned nor controlled by any church. Moscow resident Linda Pike opined in a recent Moscow Pullman daily newsletter to the editor, Wilson himself sees no room for compromise, foreshadowing the January 6th Capitol insurrection in 2019 interview, opining that the cultural war in Moscow reflected what was happening nationally. The country, he said, seems to be in a slow-motion civil war with no bullets. The only possible solution is a massive religious revival. He said, short of that, we're headed for trouble. This guy's off his fucking rocker, guys. Let's get into this quick video.
Before ship station, it was crazy. It's great when you see, 100 orders come in, and then you realize I got 100 orders.
In northern Idaho's dunes of grains and grass, a battle without bullets over the direction of a town.
I believe that what's happening in Moscow is a microcosm of what's happening all across the country. That started here maybe 10 or 15 years earlier than what's happening across the country.
And that is?
Well, just a radical division. I don't think our nation has been this divided since 1859. It's divided and it's inflamed. And that whole process, I think, began to be visible here a decade or a decade and a half before it became radically visible in the nation as a whole.
Pastor Doug Wilson leads Christ Church in what he calls a Cold War civil war.
Our rights come to us from God and not from the government.
Fighting in, of all places, a college town. Moscow, home to University of Idaho and just 8 miles from Washington State University, exudes a live and let live vibe. One of the interesting things about Moscow is how these two entities live side by side, and I mean literally. Right behind me, that's the offices of the Christ Church. And right next door is the headquarters for the local Democratic Party. From this former art house movie theater, Wilson leads his campaign to make Moscow a Christian town.
Idaho is a very red state. Moscow was historically a very blue dot in this red state. And so consequently, the fact that we've done this has been disruptive in the minds of some, but the feasibility of evangelizing in Moscow had to do with the importance of the university and the size of the town.
So, in your version of a Christian town, would there
I'm going
be
to turn my camera off and mute my
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
microphone so that way you guys can hear without any background interference.
You mean legally?
Yes.
You mean like marriage?
Mhm.
No marriage. But there'd be same-sex couples.
No marriage, even though it's the law of the land in the United States?
Just like Roe used to be, right? In my belief system, in our doctrinal stand, and what we believe the Bible teaches, homosexuality is not only a choice, but a sinful one. Yes.
It is a muscular, masculine-led vision of Christianity.
Scripture tells the man to provide, protect, and love. Scripture tells the woman to honor, help, and submit.
Expounded on his show Man Rampant.
Men are going to be dominant no matter what you do.
And articulated in his blogs. This one saying marriage is a little kingdom and the husband is a little king.
A wife should be submissive to her husband, as Paul teaches in multiple places, yes. So a wife should be submissive to her husband, but in the blog post that you just cited, I made a special point of saying that the woman exercises authority over the selection of the one that she's going to submit to.
So when you say wives should be submissive to their husbands, does this mean why should they be equal?
Well, because God created us a certain way. So we want to fit with the design.
Former Mayor Nancy Cheney says the community has endured decades of Wilson's often incendiary ideas.
When some kind of outrageous statements were made early on about Southern slavery as it was, as a mutually affectionate relationship between master and slave, or saying that members of our LGBTQ community, trans people, should be exiled or possibly stoned, that catches our attention.
Wilson says he was misunderstood, rebutting the many controversies on his website, writing he does not believe in the death penalty for homosexual acts, or that slavery was a positive good. But the visible and invisible lines being drawn here and elsewhere across the country are setting off alarm bells for many faith leaders.
Do you consider Christ Church a church? I don't.
Really?
I really don't.
What is it then?
I see it as a dominionist cult.
In December 2020, retired Israeli security chief said there's a galactic federation and they're staying hidden right now because we're not ready for them.
The Galactic Federation are concerned.
Paul Hellyer told me we had extraterrestrials helping our scientists on Earth.
Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Stevens leads the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Palouse.
In the public square, I don't see them representing Christianity. I don't see them representing the values that I find in the Bible. I see them representing patriarchy. I see them fighting the culture war.
Stevens' position in that war is visible for all to see. A stained glass rainbow chalice. Wilson fights with the printed word. A prolific author, he's written dozens of books, all distributed by his own Canon Press. It publishes more than 1,000 different titles, half of which are books and materials serving hundreds of thousands of homeschool and Christian students nationwide. Wilson laughs off the cult accusation, but the former Navy man embraces culture warrior.
You can't have a naval warfare without ships, and you can't have tank warfare without tanks. And as I tell Christians all around the country, you can't have culture war unless you have a culture. Our tagline is all of Christ for all of life. So we want to be 7-day-a-week, 24-hour Christians in everything we do, and a distinctively Christian culture is forming here, and not reclusive and not cultic, but it's distinct.
Here in Moscow, Wilson and Christ Church have built a multi-million-dollar enterprise that includes a K-12 school, a publishing house, a college, and a streaming show. Pursuits that some worry will change the very character of this town.
What scares me is that he is making Moscow into a Wilson town.
Keely Emery Mix is a former pastor.
What worries me is not that the stamp of Christ might be wrongly shoved down the throats of my neighbors here in Moscow, but that the stamp in the foot of Doug Wilson will be wrongly and is being wrongly crammed down their throats or standing on their neck. I think that his influence on this town has been despicable.
Aubrey and Wyatt Knickerbocker met 2 years after her family moved to Moscow, seeking a Christian town.
We found what at first we thought was a very welcoming community. There was something every day, something new, some sort of baby shower or something for the school. You get very swept up in all of it.
Until they heard this message from another pastor in the church.
Women should wear women's clothes. They shouldn't wear pants.
Shouldn't have short hair.
Shouldn't have short hair. Men shouldn't wear earrings. No one should have tattoos.
And then there was this, a psalm sing in the middle of the pandemic, protesting the local mask mandate, retweeted by then President Trump.
That was when I realized that these were not people trying to spread awareness or trying to spread the good news of Christ. It was people trying to say, look at us, we are so oppressed.
Did you feel betrayed when you realized that? How would you describe your feelings?
Yes, very betrayed, because I've grown up in the Christian church, and it never occurred to me that a church could be wrong, and how wrong they could be.
They stopped attending Christ Church. Aubrey says she was attacked online. Now they actively avoid patronizing businesses run by church members.
If it was another church that owned it and they just happened to have some beliefs that I didn't agree with, that's fine. But when you're hurting people, that's when you have really crossed many lines.
Are you being judged on your faith rather than your product?
I believe 100% that that's true.
Josh Flickner says he came to Moscow seeking a Christian community and found it in Christ Church. But his business, Journey's End Cafe, is paying the price for where he worships.
I really wanted this place to be actually a bridge builder in the community, and so it's really a bummer that that a lot of people in the community are just so full of bigotry that they do not want to even try to build those bridges.
He says his workers are threatened by crank calls, and his future by a social media campaign calling out businesses run by church members.
Look at what people say about my business, and then pretend like I was not a white, heterosexual Christian male. That would be a hate crime. Anywhere else in the country, against any other type of person, that would be a hate crime.
3 weeks after this interview, Flickner announced he's closing the cafe. So how close is Wilson to reaching his goal of turning Moscow into a Christian town? Well, no one is quite sure, but everyone has an opinion.
Honestly, it's almost laughable, only because you're talking about a minute percentage of the population.
George Scandalos and Brandy Sullivan own restaurants and businesses on Main Street.
As someone who has served on the city council, I haven't seen any traction gained in that area. The last two elections, there were some candidates who were members of Christ Church, and those elections were very uneven. and
I would call it a landslide.
There you go.
In defeat?
Yeah.
You have 700 active households, about 2,000 church attendees. This is a city of 25,000 people. Is the way to reach your goal to bring in more people or to convert the hearts and minds of those who already live here?
It would be both. Yeah, we would want to persuade the people who are already here, and we want to welcome the people who arrive here.
Like many other churches, Wilson's deals with accusations of sex abuse, including a deacon this summer pleading guilty to a federal charge of child pornography, and Wilson marrying a released child molester to a church member.
The thing that upsets people is not the child molestation offense, because there are 20, 30 sex offenders in Moscow, and everybody knows the name of one of them because of where it goes to church. Right? The ones who don't go to church, they're all okay. They stay out of
dropping a video here in a few
the one
about Doug Wilson,
repentant and wants to live right and is, straightened out. We're going to go after him because this is because the target is actually me.
Wilson, if anything, seems energized by the criticism and attention, and undeterred from his goal.
Do you see expanding this microcosm from Moscow to the full United States?
It's hard to envision how that might happen. I think it would be wonderful if it did. So if there were a reformation and revival, that's something we pray for regularly. And if what is happening here caught fire and spread elsewhere, I would be very, very grateful.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
I am currently a graduate student at Northwestern University in the Master's Program for Public.
The problem is that it is not possible to smash the foundation without also destroying the house. It is not possible to smash the patriarchy without also smashing everything it was holding up. And as we look around at the demolition job that is occurring throughout our culture and the smoke that is rising up from the debris, the thought occurs to us that this may have been the point all along. Introduction. I trust that you've watched the NQN trailer 3 or 4 times now, and so you have noticed the line about apocalypse-proofing your family. The first step in learning how to do this is to learn how to quit doing the things that do not work at all. Well, correct that actually. The first thing to do is to quit doing the things that are causing the problem, and then after that to quit trotting out the solutions that don't work at all. One of the lame maneuvers is that of pretending that no apocalypse is happening, and hence there's no need to do anything. That works about as well as you might expect. The other is to recognize that there are in fact grave threats hurtling toward you and your family in the form of fireballs the size of grapefruit. And so you undertake to ward them off with a shield that you obtained for $19.95 from Joyce Meyer Ministries. That shield is made out of balsa wood and tissue paper, and in the insult to injury department, the tissue paper is pink. And far from slowing anything down, these shields just made the fireballs act a little happier somehow. The problem has been a dearth of biblical masculinity, and the solution is naturally going to require a restoration of biblical masculinity. More honest than non, as we boomers like to put it. Yea, verily, like a stick of cotton candy. The last few years was a stress test that a kindly providence applied to the approved evangelical leadership of North America, ALENA. And speaking of fireballs, the AELNA disappeared in one. This stress test consisted of a number of new and unique pressures, of the sort concerning which our seminaries of homiletical slickness had not offered any courses, and as we have now discovered, the ability to be glib and slick during the Q&A of whatever the heck conference it might have been, turned out to be an ability that was of no use at all when it came to dealing with Donald Trump, Trump derangement syndrome, toxic slop from Wuhan, election rigging, the eager adoption of mandatory pathogen collectors for the face, the shutdown of our obviously non-essential worship services, and of course the obligatory vaccine for a population of docile pincushions. Watching the shepherds harangue the sheep about Romans 13 was like watching an 8th grade student council president pull rank on a 5th grader over a seat in the lunchroom, threatening to quote-unquote tell teacher. And watching the wolves deal with the shepherds was like watching someone take a blowtorch to a stick of cotton candy. The grace of crisis. One of the things that God does in history is to give us periodic foretastes of what will happen at the end of history. Recognized or not, all of us spend every day dealing with the permanent things right alongside the evanescent things. Because of our frailty, these categories can get a bit blurry for us, and we can sometimes forget which is which. One seems to blend into the other, and this is why God will regularly grant us the grace of a crisis. And when the grace is great, the crisis is great. What a crisis does is separate. It divides up the things that matter from the things that don't matter. It separates the eternal things, the permanent things, from the passing and temporal things. Our lives are surrounded every day with things that cannot be shaken and things that can be. And because we get in a muddle over it, God periodically grants us the grace of an earthquake. Quote, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he hath promised, saying, Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Hebrews 12, 26 and 27. A storm is revelatory. A good storm is apocalyptic. The word apocalypse means an unveiling. The Latin equivalent is revelatio, from which we get our name for the book of Revelation. But what is revealed in a God-given crisis? Some think it is a pulling back of the curtain so that we can just see the cables and ropes backstage and the scenery waiting for Act 2. But I think it would be better to think of the unveiling as a manifestation of the difference between the marble pillars and the plaster ones. Quote, "And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." Matthew 7:25 and 27. The storm hit both houses hard, and it revealed the difference that true bedrock makes. All the extra money that was spent getting down to bedrock paid off, and that same amount of money that went into the curb appeal of the other house instead, well, that curb appeal is now kindling. The shutters have been a nice touch. That's one of them over there, over in the road next to the stop sign. We are warned about this form of grace in multiple places. It is almost as though God wanted Christian ministers to think about this a lot. Quote, "Every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire, and the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so is by fire." 1 Corinthians 3:13 and 15. This passage is likely talking about the last day, but we should remember that God is a true master of foreshadowing. What he will do at the end of history, he has done many times throughout history. And if you and your ministry could not run with men, then how will you run with horses? Jeremiah 12:5. If your ministry could not withstand a bad case of the flu and a ginned up and stampeding panic, then how will your ministry do when the heavens are rolled back like a scroll and the mountains and islands are moved in their places? Quit you like men. And so not only is biblical masculinity not the disease, it is the solution. God has determined that men should occupy the positions of leadership in each of the basic governments that he has established among men. These governments would be those of our civic life, Isaiah 3:12, our life together in the church, 1 Timothy 2:12, and in the family, 1 Corinthians 11:3. In the first place, he appointed men to take glad and sacrificial responsibility in these areas, and by men, I mean males. In addition to that, he required the males that he placed in these positions of authority and responsibility to act like men and not simply males. Quote, "Watch ye, stand fast in the faith. Quit you like men, be strong." 1 Corinthians 16:13. When this is operating the way it ought to operate, the result is something called the patriarchy. That which, according to our soi-disant and lisping political theorists, must be smashed. Only they say something like smashed. The problem is that it is not possible to smash the foundation without also destroying the house. It is not possible to smash the patriarchy without also smashing everything that it was holding up. And as we look around at the demolition job that is occurring throughout our culture and the smoke that is rising up from the debris, the thought occurs to us that this may have been the point all along. One of the blessings that such biblical leadership provides is that of a masculine presence and authority when a crisis hits. And so that is what a lot of people are looking around for now. But there is a problem: exile or desertion. In Christian circles, it has become customary to lament all the abdicating men. But it would be more accurate and sound more like real repentance if we acknowledge that the men who were willing to act like men have all been outlawed. Banished as they were, we didn't see much of them, and then we pretended that their absence was voluntary on their part. But the exiles were exiled and didn't go AWOL. They were not deserters. We could go to them and ask them to return. We could humble ourselves as the elders of Gilead did and plead with Jephthah to come back, Judges 11. They exiled him for reasons that seemed like a good idea to them at the time, but at least they had the good sense to realize that this is what they had done. They didn't hold seminars in the AELNA faculty lounge in order to puzzle over where Jephthah had gotten to. And so when they were confronted with the might of Ammon and the crisis they brought in with them, they were willing to go to the land of Tob to bring Jephthah back. American men can be invited back. They didn't shimmer off and evaporate. They are still around. But what will not work is to invite them back in order to play the role of cuckolds, capons, and cotqueans. They will not come back in order to serve as replacements or administrative assistants for the current crop of gamma males. They will not return in order to augment the ranks of the little old ladies of both sexes. Men will always be dominant in the very nature of the case. They are capable of being dominant in incredibly constructive ways, in ways that are a true marvel. But we, in the grip of a very peculiar frenzy that has a death grip on our little lizard brains, have decided to outlaw constructive dominance. This has opened the door for some men to resort to the dominance of criminal destructiveness, a thing which now exiled men used to prevent. It has also resulted in others taking the path of simply checking out, leaving, going into exile. But that is also destructive. When competent men leave, things start falling apart. What the sexual revolution and feminism did was to conduct a grand experiment on how long our culture could defer maintenance on, everything. The answer appears to be 60 years, give or take. But a handful of men, like Strider, became rangers in the North and decided to contribute constructively anyway, illegally and off budget. Don't tell anybody. Relentless giveaways. Here's what we propose to do. During the week of November 1st through 5th, you can get my ebook, The Covenant Household, free on Kindle. In addition, you can listen to the audiobook free on Canon Plus. And of course, you should stay notified of everything we're going to be giving away at noquarternovember.com. And if all that festivity were not enough, my little Mablog shop here is, for the duration of this very same week, giving away my book for kids called The Adventures of Fun Dad. In the realm of picture books, this one is my manga opus, so to speak. Blah Blah Black Sheep is now available for pre-order. What is Blah Blah Black Sheep, you may ask? A natural question, certainly. It is a book for astute children, written by my son Nate, and illustrated by Forrest Dickinson. This is the famous duo of Hello Ninja fame. You know that show on Netflix? Blah Blah Black Sheep never does it right, according to the flock, but who do they call when danger's afoot? Get your copy today at blahblahkids.com.
Well, please tell me if this guy is completely nuts and off his rocker. It's well established that he's a cult leader there in Moscow, Idaho. The leader of a cultish church. So, personally, I think the guy just needs to go away for a while. Of all the anti-Semitic rants that he does on his blogs and everything else, and his cryptic freaking No Quarter November video, yeah, I swear. And did you guys see that flag behind him that said No Quarter November with the skull and the two knives on it? This guy gives me the creeps. He really does. Well, you guys have a good night, and this will be my last video I post for the night. I will post some more tomorrow. Yeah, I want to say I love all my subscribers. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. I won't let you guys down. Alright guys, peace.
When you're not here, life is insufferable. Don't be a stranger even though we said pause. Darling, I fear pause is impossible, 'cause I want your love around no matter the cost. My heart all in pieces, I lost what I